The sky over Europe in 1943 was a dangerous place. The thunder of engines, the roar of propellers, and the smell of aviation fuel mixed with the tension of a world at war. Above the clouds, two air forces clashed, and every pilot knew that even a single mistake could mean the difference between life and death. In the early days of American involvement in the European theater, the Luftwaffe had a reputation that struck fear into the hearts of Allied pilots. German fighters like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the Focke-Wulf W190 dominated the skies. Their pilots were highly trained, their machines were fast and agile, and they had honed their skills through years of intense combat. To face them was a terrifying prospect, and many Allied pilots began to feel the heavy weight of reality even before they reached the front lines. Amid this climate of danger and uncertainty, a new fighter began to enter the scene. Its appearance was met with skepticism: the P-47 Thunderbolt. To the Germans, it looked bulky, slow, and cumbersome, a plane that could barely keep up with the nimble German fighters. Pilots would glance at it, smirk, and think it was no threat at all. They had faced faster planes, more maneuverable planes, and they believed that the P-47, with its massive frame and heavy armor, would fall easily to their well-honed tactics. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see from a distance, was that this seemingly awkward, oversized aircraft was about to change the rules of aerial combat. The P-47 was not just another fighter, it was a machine built to survive. With its rugged airframe and radial engine that could take more punishment than most planes of the time, it could dive from extreme heights at incredible speeds and return fire with devastating effect. Its 8 .50 caliber machine guns were capable of raining destruction on anything in their path, and its durability allowed it to absorb hits that would have downed lighter fighters. The Americans designed it not just to dogfight but to dominate the battlefield in a way that few planes had before. Early missions for P-47 pilots were tense and full of doubt. They flew into formations of experienced German pilots who had grown used to dominating the skies with precision and terror. The Thunderbolt pilots knew that their plane's reputation preceded them, or rather, that it didn't. The Germans underestimated it, and underestimating an aircraft like the P-47 would prove to be a fatal mistake. Stories from those first encounters are as dramatic as they are incredible. A young American pilot, fresh out of training, climbing into his Thunderbolt for the first mission over occupied France, could hardly imagine the chaos that awaited him. He gripped the controls, heart pounding, listening to the roar of the massive Pratt & Whitney engine, feeling the vibration through the airframe, and wondering if he would even make it back. The Luftwaffe pilots below, seeing these bulky, armored machines, laughed. Some even waved as they prepared to engage, certain that the fight would be over quickly. But when the Thunderbolt pilot pushed the throttle, dived, and engaged those 8 .50 caliber guns, the reality became clear almost instantly. The power of the Thunderbolt was unlike anything the Luftwaffe had anticipated. German fighters that had once been untouchable suddenly found themselves struggling to survive against a plane they had dismissed as clumsy. Stories tell of enemy aircraft caught in the P-47's line of fire, the concentrated bullets tearing through wings, fuselages, and engines. Pilots who had laughed at the sight of this American giant suddenly realized they were up against a force they could not easily shake. The impact of the P-47 went beyond individual dogfights. Its arrival marked a turning point in the air war over Europe. It forced German pilots to rethink their strategies, and left a lasting impression on those who survived encounters with it. The initial laughter turned to fear, and the plane that once seemed awkward and slow became one of the most respected and feared aircraft in the sky. In every mission, the Thunderbolt proved that power, durability, and firepower could often outweigh maneuverability alone. Even more remarkable was the resilience of the P-47 pilots themselves. They faced death with courage, knowing their plane could carry them through situations where other aircraft would have fallen. They pressed on through flak, enemy fire, and the unpredictable chaos of aerial combat. Every mission tested their nerves, skill, and determination, and every return to base reinforced the growing legend of the Thunderbolt. The story of the P-47 Thunderbolt is not just about a machine. It is about the pilots who trusted it, the missions that proved its worth, and the enemies who learned, often too late, that appearances can be deceiving. It is a story of tension, courage, and the moment when skepticism met firepower head-on. And as we prepare to look closer at the battles, the tactics, and the moments that made the Thunderbolt infamous among German pilots, we begin to understand why this plane, once laughed at, became a nightmare in the skies. It's a story of surprise, of grit, and of the thunder that rained from the sky in the form of 8 relentless, 50-caliber guns. The first time a P-47 Thunderbolt met the Luftwaffe in earnest, the Germans had no idea what was coming. The air crackled with tension as formations of American fighters rose into the skies, engines screaming and propellers slicing through the thin European air. On the ground, Allied intelligence had warned of the skill and aggression of the German pilots, but in the air, it was a different story. The Germans assumed the Thunderbolt would be easy prey. Its bulk made it look slow, almost sluggish, and that impression was their first, fatal mistake. Thunderbolt pilots quickly learned to use their plane's strengths to maximum effect. One of the key advantages was its incredible dive speed. Unlike lighter fighters that could twist and turn in dogfights, the P-47 could plummet from high altitude faster than most German planes could follow. Pilots would climb above the enemy, gain height, and then dive into battle with a force that seemed unstoppable. The heavy airframe didn't hinder them. Instead, it became an asset. In the vertical plane, the Thunderbolt was unmatched, and German pilots who thought they could outmaneuver it were often caught by surprise. Another defining feature of the Thunderbolt was its armament. 8 50-caliber machine guns weren't just for show. Each round carried enough force to shred wings and fuselages, and when fired in concentrated bursts, they could bring down a fighter faster than any pilot could react. Pilots would line up their sights carefully, often taking aim from angles the enemy didn't expect. The first time a Luftwaffe pilot saw tracer rounds cutting through the air, coming directly for his cockpit, the smirk vanished. The Thunderbolt was no longer a clumsy target, it was a predator. Accounts from those early battles tell of German pilots underestimating the P-47, only to face a brutal reality. In one instance, a squadron of few 192nds dove on what they assumed was a slow, harmless target. The Thunderbolt pilot, anticipating their move, executed a high-speed dive, bringing all 8 guns to bear. The concentrated fire tore through the lead enemy plane, causing a catastrophic structural failure. The remaining pilots scattered in panic, realizing too late that the Thunderbolt was more than just a flying fortress. It was lethal, precise, and unrelenting. But the P-47's reputation wasn't built solely on firepower. Its durability allowed pilots to return from engagements that would have ended other planes. Even with large sections of the fuselage riddled with bullets, with oil lines severed or landing gear damaged, the Thunderbolt could often limp back to base. Pilots described their aircraft as a guardian angel in metal form, allowing them to survive what seemed impossible. This toughness forced the Germans to rethink their approach. Head-on attacks became deadly gambles. Surprise and sheer speed were no longer guarantees of victory against the American fighter. Interestingly, the Thunderbolt also had a psychological effect. German pilots had spent years flying against agile and lightweight planes, accustomed to dogfighting in tight formations and executing rapid maneuvers. Suddenly, the rules had changed. The P-47 demanded respect and caution. Pilots who had laughed before, confident in their skills, now found themselves hesitating, unsure how to engage. That split-second hesitation was often all the advantage the Thunderbolt needed to turn the tide of a skirmish. The Thunderbolt's impact extended beyond individual dogfights. It became a crucial asset in escort missions for American bombers over Europe. Prior to its arrival, unescorted or poorly protected bombers suffered devastating losses at the hands of the Luftwaffe. The P-47 could climb to the bombers' altitude, fly alongside them, and provide cover with its firepower. The combination of speed, guns, and resilience meant that bomber formations could operate more effectively, and Luftwaffe attacks were met with a surprising and punishing response. Bomber crews began to trust in the Thunderbolt, knowing that even in the heaviest of engagements, these flying tanks could hold their ground. There were also unique tactical maneuvers developed around the Thunderbolt's capabilities. Pilots learned to use the plane's dive speed to bounce enemy formations, striking with sudden aggression and then climbing back to safety. They discovered the value of altitude, using gravity to amplify their speed and firepower. Some pilots even employed a tactic called boom and zoom, diving from above, unleashing a storm of .50 caliber rounds, and then climbing away before the enemy could react. This approach minimized the risk of prolonged dogfights, where the Thunderbolt's relative lack of agility could be a disadvantage. Behind the technical brilliance and battlefield success, there was a human story. Young men, often barely out of their teens, climbed into these massive planes knowing they were facing experienced and deadly opponents. The bond between pilot and aircraft became a lifeline. Each mission carried the weight of survival, each encounter demanded split-second decisions, and each return to base was a testament to skill, courage, and the Thunderbolt itself. The plane wasn't just metal and guns, it was a partner in the air, a protector, and a weapon that rewrote the rules of aerial warfare. By the time the war had progressed, the P-47 had earned a fearsome reputation among the Luftwaffe. What had once been dismissed as slow and awkward was now seen as relentless, precise, and nearly indestructible. German pilots spoke of it with a mix of respect and dread. The laughter that greeted its first appearances was gone, replaced with caution and a recognition that underestimating the Thunderbolt could be fatal. As the sun set over battle-scarred landscapes, as the sound of engines faded into distant clouds, the legend of the P-47 Thunderbolt grew. It wasn't just a story of victory or machines, it was the story of a plane that changed aerial combat, of pilots who trusted in its power, and of enemies who learned, often too late, that appearances can be deceiving. The stage was set for the most intense confrontations yet, where the full might of the Thunderbolt would be unleashed, and the skies of Europe would witness moments of heroism, tension, and firepower like never before. And it is here, in the climactic battles, where we see the P-47 earn its place as one of the most feared fighters of World War II, turning ridicule into respect, and doubt into destruction. The sky over Europe had become a theater of chaos, smoke, and speed, and the P-47 Thunderbolt was now at the center of it. Pilots climbing into these massive machines knew they were stepping into the teeth of the Luftwaffe's finest, yet they did so with a confidence born from the Thunderbolt's incredible capabilities. The moments before contact were tense, almost unbearably so, the engine's roar echoing in the cockpit, the hum of the guns ready at any moment, and the knowledge that a single mistake could end it all. And then, as the clouds parted and the German fighters came into view, everything changed. Enemy pilots, trained for precision and accustomed to quick victories, were still reeling from the shock of previous encounters. Their confidence was waning, replaced by a creeping fear. The Thunderbolt dove from high above, and with it came a storm unlike any they had faced. 8 .50 caliber machine guns unleashed a torrent of lead, tracer rounds streaking through the sky in deadly precision. The first bursts tore into the wings of a Focke-Wulf 190, smoke trailing as it spiraled out of control. One by one, German planes that had underestimated this clumsy American fighter were forced into desperate evasive maneuvers, their laughter long gone, replaced by the cold reality of survival. These battles were not just about firepower, they were tests of nerves, timing, and strategy. The P-47 pilots had learned to exploit every strength of their machine. Dive speed, altitude advantage, and the ability to sustain heavy damage became tools of terror in the hands of skilled pilots. In one engagement, a squadron of German Bf 109 seconds attempted to surround a formation of Thunderbolts. The Americans held their line, climbing and diving in perfect coordination, unleashing synchronized bursts that ripped through the enemy's formation. It was like watching a storm of iron and fire, controlled with terrifying precision, each P-47 a juggernaut that seemed unstoppable. The psychological impact on the Luftwaffe was profound. Pilots who survived an encounter with the Thunderbolt carried the memory for the rest of the war. Tales circulated of pilots who hesitated at the sight of the bulky plane, even when outnumbering it. The Thunderbolt forced respect in a way no other fighter had. It had turned ridicule into fear, and in doing so, it reshaped the aerial battlefield. German pilots adapted, learning to avoid head-on engagements, but the advantage had shifted. The P-47 had proven that brute strength, firepower, and tactical ingenuity could outmatch even the most agile adversary. One of the most remarkable aspects of these confrontations was the resilience of the Thunderbolt under fire. Pilots tell of planes returning to base with hundreds of bullet holes, engines smoking, hydraulic systems failing, and still managing to land safely. In contrast, the lighter German fighters, while nimble, often could not survive a single encounter with concentrated fire. Each successful return strengthened the legend of the P-47 and inspired both fear in enemies and admiration among allies. It was a plane that didn't just fight, it endured, punished, and dominated. The culmination of the Thunderbolt's story lies in its role in escorting bombers deep into enemy territory. Before its arrival, American bombers faced staggering losses. German fighters had free rein to strike with lethal efficiency. The Thunderbolt changed that. Flying alongside B-17 seconds and B-24 seconds, the Thunderbolts became shields of firepower, swooping down on attackers, blasting them from the sky, and giving bomber crews a fighting chance they had never had before. Entire missions were transformed. Where once the bombers had flown in fear, now they had allies in the sky capable of turning the tide. Even in moments of calm, the presence of the Thunderbolt commanded attention. German pilots who survived encounters would describe the plane as a leviathan in the air, imposing and unrelenting. Its reputation grew not just from numbers or statistics, but from the visceral, terrifying reality of facing 8.50 caliber guns in the hands of pilots who had mastered its strengths. It was a plane that demanded respect, demanded strategy, and punished hubris. As the war progressed, the legacy of the Thunderbolt became undeniable. It was more than just an aircraft. It was a symbol of innovation, resilience, and the relentless spirit of the pilots who trusted in it. The stories of battles, daring maneuvers, and improbable returns became legend, told and retold among airmen and historians alike. And for the Germans who had once laughed at its appearance, those stories were a reminder that in war, underestimating your opponent can be a deadly mistake. The P-47 Thunderbolt left its mark not just in the skies over Europe, but in the minds of all who faced it. It redefined what a fighter could do, proving that raw power, strategic thinking, and unyielding courage could overturn even the most confident enemy. Every dive, every burst of machine gun fire, and every mission completed added to the legend of a plane that transformed skepticism into awe, fear into respect, and doubt into decisive victory. In the end, the P-47 Thunderbolt was not just a tool of war, it was a statement. A statement that appearances can be deceiving, that bravery and innovation matter as much as skill, and that even in the deadliest skies, the right machine in the right hands can change the course of history. And so, the plane that German pilots once laughed at became one of the most feared fighters of the Second World War, leaving behind a legacy of power, precision, and an unforgettable roar of thunder that echoed across Europe.